The stars were dying. Not in the way that stars naturally died, burning out over billions of years in a slow and beautiful dance of light. No, these stars were dying because the worlds around them were being murdered, one by one, system by system, until there was nothing left but silence and floating dust. Admiral Sirvek stood on the command bridge of his flagship, the Devourer's Maw. He was tall, even by the standards of his species. His skin was the color of dark ash, stretched tight over a skeleton that seemed too sharp, too angular to be natural. His eyes burned with a cold yellow light, like dying suns trapped in deep pits of shadow. He watched the main viewing screen with an expression that might have been boredom, or might have been hunger. With the Vreth Kai, it was often hard to tell the difference. On the screen, a planet burned. It was a beautiful world, or it had been. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds swirling in delicate patterns across the atmosphere. The Selenari had lived there for 40,000 years. They had built cities of crystal and light. They had composed symphonies that could make other species weep with joy. They had developed medicines that cured diseases across 100 worlds. Now they were dying. Vreth Kai assault pods rained down from orbit like black tears falling from a weeping god. Each pod carried 100 soldiers. Each soldier carried weapons that could turn living flesh into ash in seconds. The Selenari had no military. They had believed, in their foolish optimism, that the galaxy had moved beyond war. They had trusted in treaties and alliances and the basic goodness of intelligent life. They had been wrong. Sirvex watched the death toll counter in the corner of his screen. It spun upward so fast that the numbers blurred. 10 million, 50 million, 200 million. The Selenari were not fighters. They ran, they hid, they begged for mercy, but there was no mercy in the Vreth Kai. There had never been mercy in the Vreth Kai. Admiral, said his second-in-command, a scarred warrior named Kethvor. The planetary shield generators have fallen. We can begin the final bombardment. Not yet, Sirvek said. His voice was like stones grinding together in a deep cave. Let our soldiers have their pleasure. Let them hunt. It has been too long since they tasted real fear. Kethvor nodded. He understood. The Vreth Kai did not simply conquer worlds. They consumed them. They fed on terror as much as they fed on resources. Each scream of a dying Selenari was a small meal. Each city that burned was a feast. This was the way of the Vreth Kai. This was the way it had always been. 300 years ago, the Vreth Kai had been confined to a single system on the edge of the galaxy. They had been primitive, savage, fighting among themselves for scraps of food and territory. Other species had known about them, of course. The Galactic Council had sent observers and researchers. They had written reports about the interesting but ultimately harmless Vreth Kai, a species that would probably destroy itself before it ever reached the stars. They had been wrong about that too. A Vreth Kai warlord named Sirketh Sirvex's great-grandfather had united the warring clans through a combination of brutality, cunning, and a new religion. He had taught the Vreth Kai that they were not simply another species among many. They were the chosen ones. The galaxy existed to feed them, to fuel their growth, to serve as prey for their endless hunger. The first species they had conquered had been their neighbors, a peaceful race of traders called the Mulvanni. The Mulvanni had welcomed the Vreth Kai ships, believing they were coming to trade. They had learned their mistake only when the killing began. After the Mulvanni came the Thessari, then the Korvath, then dozens of others. Each conquest made the Vreth Kai stronger. They took technology and resources from the fallen. They took slaves to work in their factories and mines. They took worlds as new breeding grounds for their ever-growing population. The Galactic Council had tried to stop them, of course. In the early days, before the Vreth Kai had grown too powerful, the Council had assembled a fleet of 1,000 warships. It was the largest military force ever gathered in that part of the galaxy. Admirals from a dozen species had stood together on the bridge of the command ship, confident that they would crush the Vreth Kai threat once and for all. The battle had lasted 3 days. When it was over, the Council fleet was scattered wreckage, and the Vreth Kai had added 1,000 new warships to their armada. After that, the conquests came faster. Species that had stood for millions of years fell in weeks. Ancient empires crumbled like sand castles before a rising tide. The Galactic Council retreated again and again, losing members with each step backward, until it was little more than a government in exile, hiding in the remote reaches of the Perseus Fringe. And still the Vrithkai came. Still they hungered. Still they consumed. Cervex watched the death toll on Selenari Prime climb past 10 billion. Soon there would be nothing left but corpses and ashes. His soldiers would strip the planet of everything valuable: metals, fuels, genetic material, whatever could be used or sold or fed to the ever-hungry Vrithkai war machine. Then they would move on to the next world, and the next, and the next. There was no end to it. There would never be an end to it. The Vrithkai were not interested in ruling the galaxy. They were interested in emptying it. "Admiral," Kethvor said suddenly. His voice had changed. There was something in it that Cervex had not heard in a very long time. It took him a moment to recognize it. It was uncertainty. "What is it?" "A transmission from Deep Station 7. They are reporting. Strange readings." "Strange how?" "Something is emerging from the Sagittarius void." Cervex turned from the viewing screen. His yellow eyes narrowed. "That is impossible. Nothing can survive the void. The radiation levels alone would destroy any ship within days." "I am only reporting what they have detected, Admiral. There is definitely something there. It is moving toward Council space at speeds that should not be possible." Cervex considered this for a moment. The Sagittarius void was a region of space that even the Vrithkai avoided. It was a vast emptiness, hundreds of light years across, filled with nothing but radiation and death. No species had ever crossed it. No species had ever tried, and yet something was coming through. "It is probably just a sensor ghost," Cervex said finally. "The radiation in that region plays tricks on our equipment. Ignore it. We have more important matters to attend to." He turned back to the viewing screen. Selenari Prime was now mostly dark, its cities extinguished, its oceans beginning to boil under the heat of the bombardment. The death toll had stopped climbing, because there was no one left to count. Another world consumed, another species erased from history. Cervex felt a small moment of satisfaction. This was what he had been born to do. This was what all Vrithkai had been born to do. They were the apex predators of the galaxy, and everything else was prey. But somewhere in the back of his mind, something stirred. A tiny whisper of unease. He pushed it away and focused on the burning world before him. He did not know it yet, but he had just made the greatest mistake of his life. Far away, on the outer edge of the dying galaxy, the Galactic Council held its last session. The great chamber that had once held representatives from 1,000 species now echoed with emptiness. Only 47 delegations remained, and many of those were represented by holograms, their homeworlds already destroyed, their people scattered across refugee ships and hidden colonies. High Arbiter Molketh of the Selenari sat in his floating chair, his crystalline body dim with grief. He had just received word that his homeworld was gone. 17 billion of his people, dead in a single day. He was now the leader of a species with no home, no future, and no hope. Around him, the other delegates sat in similar states of despair. Ambassador Vryn of the Korvath, her scales dull with exhaustion. Admiral Kethras of the Mindweavers, his telepathic mind closed off from the constant psychic screams of dying civilizations. Representative Golmeth of the Thessari, weeping openly because his species did not believe in hiding their grief. They had gathered to discuss strategy, but there was no strategy left to discuss. Their fleets were destroyed. Their armies were scattered. Their resources were exhausted. All that remained was the slow, inevitable march toward extinction. "We must sue for peace," said one of the holographic representatives, a Korvath trader whose colony ship was hiding somewhere in the dark spaces between stars. "Perhaps if we offer tribute, if we agree to serve the Vrithkai, they will spare what remains of us." "You fool," Vryn said, her voice sharp with contempt. "The Vrithkai do not want tribute. They do not want slaves. They want us dead. All of us. Every last one. There is no peace to be made with a species that sees us as nothing more than food. Then what do you suggest? That we fight? With what? Our thoughts and prayers?" The chamber fell into bitter silence. It was the same argument they had been having for years, going around and around in circles while the Vrithkai consumed world after world. Fight or surrender, resist or submit, die on their feet or die on their knees. In the end, it did not matter. They were all going to die regardless. Admiral Kethras stirred in his seat. He was ancient, even by the standards of the long-lived Mindweavers. His skin had faded to a pale gray, and his eyes were clouded with age. He had not spoken in council sessions for years, preferring to sit in silence while the others argued about nothing. But now he raised his hand, and the chamber fell quiet. "I sense something," he said. His voice was a dry whisper, like dead leaves blowing across stone. "Something is coming. The Vrethkai advance fleet has already been detected," Molketh said wearily. "We know they are coming. That is why we are having this useless discussion." "Not the Vrethkai," Kethras said. "Something else. Something different." He closed his eyes, his telepathic powers reaching out across the vast distances of space. "It is coming from the void, from the Sagittarius void." The delegates exchanged confused glances. Everyone knew that nothing could survive the void. It was a death zone, a barrier that even the Vrethkai respected. "What is it?" Vryn asked. "Can you identify it?" Kethras was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was strange, almost wondering. "Minds," he said. "I sense minds. They are unusual. They burn with something I have not felt in a very long time, something I had almost forgotten existed." "What?" "Anger," Kethras said. "Pure, focused, righteous anger. And beneath that, determination. They have decided to do something, and nothing in the universe will stop them." He opened his eyes. "I do not know what species they are. I do not recognize the pattern of their thoughts. But whoever they are not afraid. They are not running. They are coming here with a purpose. Perhaps another refugee fleet," Molketh suggested, though his voice held little hope. "Perhaps survivors from one of the fallen empires." "No," Kethras said. "This is something new. Something the galaxy has not seen before." He paused, his clouded eyes seeming to look at something very far away. I believe they are coming to fight." The council chamber erupted in confused murmurs. Coming to fight? With what? Against the Vrethkai armada that had destroyed everything in its path for 3 centuries? But Kethras was no longer listening to the others. He was focused entirely on the distant minds, trying to understand them, trying to read their intentions. What he found there was unlike anything he had ever encountered. These beings, whoever they were, had known suffering. He could feel the echoes of it in their thoughts, loss so profound that it had carved permanent scars in their consciousness. They had lost everything. Their homes, their families, their entire world. But they had not broken. They had not surrendered. They had not given in to despair. Instead, they had done something impossible. They had taken their grief and their rage and forged it into something new, something hard, something sharp, something that burned with a cold, patient flame that would never go out. They were coming to fight, yes, but more than that, they were coming to win. Not because they believed they could, not because the odds were in their favor, but because they simply refused to accept any other outcome. Kethras had lived for over 1,000 years. He had seen species rise and fall. He had witnessed the birth of empires and the death of civilizations. He had touched the minds of countless beings across the galaxy, but he had never, in all his long life, encountered anything like this. "Who are they?" Vryn asked, seeing the expression on the old Mindweaver's face. What species could possibly be coming from the void? Kethras was about to answer that he did not know. But then, faintly, he caught something else. A word, a name, an identity that echoed through the minds of those approaching ships like a war cry. "They call themselves humans," he said slowly. "And I think they are very, very angry about something. Deep in the Sagittarius void, surrounded by radiation that should have killed everything aboard 100 times over, a single ship moved through the darkness. It was not a large ship, not by the standards of the great fleets that had once protected the galaxy. It was perhaps a kilometer long, angular and dark, with a hull that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. There were no decorations on its surface, no symbols of nation or allegiance. There was only a name, painted in white letters, near the bow. UES Prometheus. United Earthship Prometheus. The last ship of a dead world. The final hope of an extinct species, or so the galaxy believed. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge, her hands clasped behind her back, her eyes fixed on the main viewing screen. She was not a young woman anymore. 18 years in, the void had aged her, turned her hair gray, and carved deep lines into her face. But her eyes were the same as they had always been, dark and hard and absolutely unforgiving. Around her, her crew worked in silence. There were only 47 of them left, down from the 800 who had begun the journey. The void had taken the rest. Radiation, system failures, accidents, despair. But the survivors had learned to do the work of hundreds. They had become more efficient, more focused, more driven than any crew in human history. They did not complain. They did not question. They simply worked, hour after hour, day after day, keeping the Prometheus alive through sheer, stubborn determination. "Captain," said Lieutenant James Chen, her second in command. He was young, he had been only 17 when they fled Sol, but his eyes had the same hardness as hers. "We are clearing the void. Sensors are detecting the first star systems ahead. The Vrethkai? Everywhere, Captain. Their territory stretches across the entire Orion arm. The species we came to find. Most of them are gone." Vasquez nodded slowly. She had expected this. During their long journey through the void, they had picked up transmissions, distress calls, pleas for help, final messages from dying civilizations. They had listened to it all, cataloged it all, and burned it into their memories. And the Galactic Council? Still exists. Barely. They are hiding in the Perseus fringe. The Vrethkai will reach them within a month. Then we have a month. Vasquez turned to face her crew. All 47 of them were looking at her now, waiting. They had followed her through hell itself. They would follow her anywhere. 18 years ago, she said, her voice cutting through the silence of the bridge, the Vrethkai came to our home. They came expecting easy prey. They came expecting us to run, to hide, to die quietly like all the others. Her crew nodded. They remembered. They all remembered. They killed 8 billion people. They burned our cities. They poisoned our oceans. They turned our beautiful blue world into a dead rock. Her voice grew harder. But we did not die quietly. We fought them with everything we had. We made them pay for every inch of our soil and blood. And when we could not win, we ran not to save ourselves, but to come back, to return when we were ready. She gestured at the viewing screen, where the first stars of the Orion arm were beginning to appear. We have spent 18 years preparing for this moment. 18 years crossing the uncrossable. 18 years becoming something the galaxy has never seen before. Captain Elena Vasquez smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of a hunter who had finally sighted her prey. The Vrethkai thought they destroyed humanity. They were wrong. We survived. We adapted. We evolved. She turned back to the viewing screen. And now, we have come to collect our debt. Every life they took. Every city they burned. Every child who died screaming for parents who could not save them. We remember it all, and we are going to make them pay. She raised her hand, and the crew snapped to attention. Set course for the Galactic Council. Maximum speed. It is time for humanity to announce its return. The Prometheus surged forward, leaving the void behind. Ahead lay a galaxy in chains, a civilization on the edge of extinction, and an enemy that had never known defeat. All of that was about to change. Humanity had come home, and humanity was angry. Captain Elena Vasquez remembered the day the Vrethkai came to Sol. She had been a young officer then, serving aboard the UES Defender, one of Earth's newest warships. Humanity had only been traveling among the stars for about 200 years. They had colonized Mars and a dozen moons. They had sent exploration ships to nearby star systems. They had made contact with a few alien species, mostly traders and wanderers who passed through that quiet corner of the galaxy. Humanity knew about the Vrethkai, of course. Everyone knew about the Vrethkai. But Earth was far from the front lines of that distant war. The Galactic Council was handling it. The great empires of the Orion arm would stop the threat long before it reached such a remote system. That was what everyone believed. They were wrong. The Vrethkai arrived without warning. One moment, the space around Earth was empty and peaceful. The next moment, 1,000 black ships appeared, their dark hulls blocking out the stars like a spreading stain of shadow. Elena remembered standing on the bridge of the Defender, watching the sensor screens fill with red icons. So many ships. So impossibly many ships. The entire Earth fleet, 200 vessels. The pride of human engineering, looked like toys next to the Vrethkai armada. All ships, this is Admiral Chen, came the voice over the fleet communication channel. Prepare for combat. We will protect our home or die trying. They died trying. The battle lasted 6 hours. The Vreth-Kai weapons tore through human shields like they were made of paper. Human missiles and energy beams splashed harmlessly against Vreth-Kai armor. Ship after ship exploded, their crews dying in the cold vacuum of space. Elena's own ship, the Defender, was hit 3 times. The first hit destroyed their main engines. The second hit killed half the crew. The third hit would have finished them, but by then the battle was already over. The Vreth-Kai had stopped firing. They had more important work to do. From the crippled bridge of her dying ship, Elena watched the Vreth-Kai assault pods rain down on Earth. She watched her home burn. The invasion lasted 3 weeks. 3 weeks of constant fighting, constant dying, constant horror. Humanity had no army to speak of. They had never needed one. But they fought anyway. Soldiers with rifles, police with pistols, civilians with kitchen knives and baseball bats. They fought in the streets of New York. They fought in the fields of China. They fought in the mountains of Switzerland, and the deserts of Africa, and the frozen plains of Antarctica. Wherever the Vreth-Kai landed, they found humans waiting for them, armed with whatever they could find, ready to die for every inch of soil. And they did die. By the millions, by the billions, but they made the Vreth-Kai pay for it. Elena later learned that the invasion of Earth cost the Vreth-Kai more soldiers than any other conquest in their 300-year history. Not because humans were stronger or better armed, but because humans simply refused to surrender. They refused to run. They refused to accept that they had lost. Even when the cities were burning, even when the oceans were boiling, even when there was nothing left to fight for, humans kept fighting. It was not enough. In the end, the Vreth-Kai won. Of course they won. They had won 1,000 times before, against species far more advanced than humanity. Earth was just another conquest, just another meal for their endless hunger. But something happened during those 3 weeks that had never happened before. The Vreth-Kai commander, a general named Searmoth, grew frustrated. The conquest was taking too long. Too many of his soldiers were dying. This primitive species, this tiny civilization that should have been crushed in days, was proving to be far more difficult than expected. So Searmoth made a decision. Instead of continuing the ground invasion, he ordered his fleet to bombard the planet from orbit. He would burn away the resistance, sterilize the surface, and move on to more important targets. It was efficient. It was practical. It was the Vreth-Kai way, but it was also a mistake, because while Searmoth was focused on burning Earth, he failed to notice a single ship slipping away from the battle. A ship that had been damaged but not destroyed. A ship that carried 12,000 human survivors in cryogenic chambers, along with the most brilliant scientists and engineers that humanity had ever produced. That ship was the Prometheus, and it was about to disappear into the one place no one would ever think to look. The Sagittarius Void was a region of space that everyone avoided. It stretched for hundreds of light years, a vast emptiness filled with nothing but radiation and death. The stars in that region had exploded long ago, leaving behind clouds of radioactive particles that would kill any living thing within hours. No species had ever crossed the void. No species had ever tried. But humanity was desperate. And desperate people do impossible things. Captain Marcus Vasquez, Elena's father, had been in command of the Prometheus when it fled Sol. He was a practical man, a quiet man, a man who had spent his life studying the stars and dreaming of the day humanity would explore them. Watching his world burn had broken something inside him, but it had also lit a fire. "We cannot fight them head-on," he told his officers as the Prometheus limped away from the dying Earth. "We cannot hide from them. They will find us eventually. Our only hope is to go somewhere they cannot follow, somewhere no one would ever expect." He pointed to the star charts. "To the void. The radiation will kill us," said the chief medical officer. "We will be dead within a week. Not if we modify the ship. Not if we build better shielding. Not if we use the cryogenic chambers to slow our metabolisms. It will take years to cross. Perhaps decades. Then we will sleep. And while we sleep, our computers will work. They will analyze the Vreth-Kai technology we captured. They will develop new weapons, new defenses, new strategies. When we wake up on the other side, we will be ready. Ready for what? We are 12,000 people against an empire of billions." Captain Vasquez looked at his officers. His eyes were hard. His voice was harder, ready to make them pay. The crossing took 18 years. Elena Vasquez was 28 years old when they entered the void. She was 46 when they emerged on the other side. But those 18 years had not been spent in peaceful sleep. The cryogenic chambers were imperfect. They slowed the aging process but did not stop it entirely. People woke up in cycles, spending months at a time maintaining the ship, repairing systems, checking on their sleeping companions. Elena spent more time awake than most. After her father died in the third year, killed by a radiation leak that he had deliberately sealed himself inside to contain, she became the captain. The responsibility fell on her shoulders, and she carried it without complaint. She also spent that time learning. The Prometheus had captured pieces of Vrethkai technology during the battle for Sol. Weapons, shields, computer systems. In the years that followed, human scientists took those pieces apart and studied them. They learned how they worked. They learned how to improve them. But more importantly, they learned how to go beyond them. Humanity had always been good at innovation. It was perhaps their greatest gift. Other species were stronger or faster or lived longer, but no species in the galaxy could match humanity's ability to look at a problem and find a solution that no one else had ever imagined. In the void, with nothing to do but work and think and plan, that ability flourished. The first breakthrough came in the 5th year, when a physicist named Dr. Sarah Kim discovered a way to manipulate gravity itself. Her equations were revolutionary. Her prototype device was crude, but it worked. Suddenly, the Prometheus could accelerate without feeling the force. It could turn on a point, changing direction in ways that seemed to violate the laws of physics. It could generate gravity wells that crushed enemy projectiles before they ever reached the hull. The second breakthrough came in the 8th year, when a weapons engineer named Colonel James Mitchell developed what he called a quantum disruptor. It was a weapon that did not simply damage enemy ships, it erased them. It reached into the quantum structure of matter and simply deleted it. No explosion, no debris, just empty space where a ship had been. The third breakthrough came in the 12th year. It was the most important one of all. Dr. Michael Wong, a neuroscientist who had been studying the effects of cryogenic sleep on the human brain, discovered something remarkable. When humans were connected to certain kinds of computer systems, their minds could be linked together, not just to communicate, to become something greater than the sum of their parts. A single human mind was impressive. 1,000 human minds, linked together, were unstoppable. Wong called it the Unity Network. It allowed the connected humans to share thoughts, share experiences, share skills. A farmer could suddenly have the knowledge of a surgeon. A child could have the wisdom of an elder. And when those linked minds focused on a single task, they could achieve things that would take individual minds years to accomplish. But the Unity Network had another function, one that Wong discovered almost by accident. Human emotions, it turned out, were incredibly powerful when amplified through the network. Focused correctly, they could affect the physical world in ways that science could not fully explain. Joy could heal wounds. Love could strengthen shields. And anger could kill. The first test of the network's offensive capabilities was performed in the 16th year of the crossing. Wong connected 100 volunteers and asked them to focus on a single target, a small asteroid drifting through the void. The volunteers thought about the Vrethkai. They thought about their families who had died. They thought about their home that had burned. They thought about the screams of children and the smell of ash and the endless, helpless rage that had lived in their hearts for 16 years. The asteroid exploded. It simply shattered, as if struck by an invisible hammer. No weapon had touched it. No energy beam had hit it. 100 human minds, focusing their fury through the Unity Network, had reached out across empty space and destroyed it. Captain Elena Vasquez watched the test from the bridge. Her face showed no emotion. Her eyes showed everything. "How many can we connect?" she asked. "In theory," Wong said, "all 12,000. But the energy requirements would be enormous. We would need a way to channel it, focus it, direct it, at our enemies." Vasquez nodded slowly. "Then we build a way. We have 2 more years before we reach the other side. That is plenty of time." She turned back to the viewing screen, where the distant stars of the Orion Arm were beginning to appear through the thinning radiation. "We are going to teach the Vrethkai something they have never learned before," she said. "We are going to teach them what happens when you do not finish the job, when you leave survivors, when you give your enemy 18 years to prepare for revenge." Her smile was cold and hard and absolutely terrifying. "They should have killed us all. They should have made sure nothing was left. But they did not. and now they are going to pay for that mistake with everything they have. The final 2 years of the crossing were spent in preparation. The Prometheus was transformed. Its hull was reinforced with new alloys that could withstand weapons fire that would vaporize normal ships. Its engines were upgraded with the gravity manipulation technology, making it faster and more maneuverable than anything in the galaxy. Its weapons systems were replaced with quantum disruptors and gravity lances and a dozen other innovations that human scientists had dreamed up during the long voyage. But the most important modification was invisible. Throughout the ship, a network of neural interfaces was installed. Every cryogenic chamber was connected to the central computer. Every sleeping human was linked to the Unity network, their minds touching in ways that were both intimate and vast. They dreamed together. They remembered together. They hated together. And when the time came, they would fight together. On the day the Prometheus finally emerged from the Sagittarius void, Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge and addressed her crew. All 47 who were currently awake gathered around her, their faces thin and pale from years of radiation and recycled air. "We left Earth 18 years ago," she said. "We left as refugees. We left as the survivors of a massacre. We left with nothing but our ship, our people, and our anger." She gestured at the viewing screen, where the stars of the Orion Arm spread out before them like a field of diamonds. "Now we return, not as refugees, not as survivors. We return as something new. Something the Vrithkai have never faced before." She paused, letting her words sink in. "I will not lie to you. What we are about to do is dangerous, perhaps impossible. We are one ship against an empire. We are 12,000 people against billions. By every measure of logic and reason, we should fail." Her eyes swept across the bridge, meeting the gaze of each crew member in turn. "But I have learned something during these 18 years. Something about humanity. Something about who we are and what we are capable of." She straightened, her voice growing stronger. "We are not a species that accepts impossible. We are not a species that surrenders to logic. When the universe tells us something cannot be done, we do it anyway. When we are told to die quietly, we fight instead. When we are beaten down, broken, left for dead, we get back up." She pointed at the viewing screen. "Out there, the Vrithkai are conquering the galaxy. They believe they have won. They believe there is no one left to stop them. They believe that humanity is extinct, just another dead species to add to their collection." Her smile was fierce. "Let us show them how wrong they are. Let us show them what happens when you kill 8 billion people but leave 12,000 alive. Let us show them the price of their arrogance." She raised her fist. "For Earth, for everyone we lost, for the future we were denied, we fight." The crew answered with a single voice, a roar that echoed through the bridge and down the corridors and into the very heart of the ship where 12,000 dreamers slept, waiting to be awakened. "We fight." The Prometheus surged forward, its dark hull cutting through space like a blade of shadow. Behind it lay the void, the crossing, the long years of preparation. Ahead lay the galaxy, the enemy, the war that would change everything. Humanity was coming home, and nothing in the universe was going to stop them. In the command center of the Devourer's Maw, Admiral Sirvex received another strange report from his deep space sensors. The object that had emerged from the void was moving faster than any ship he had ever seen. It was heading directly toward Council space. He dismissed it again. A single ship was no threat to the Vrithkai. Whatever species had somehow survived the crossing, they would learn the same lesson that every other species had learned. The Vrithkai were the masters of the galaxy. Nothing could stand against them. Sirvex would soon learn just how wrong he was. Far across the galaxy, in the council chamber, Admiral Kethras opened his eyes. He had been meditating, trying to understand the minds he had sensed emerging from the void. Now, as the Prometheus drew closer, he could feel them more clearly. There were so many of them, thousands of minds, linked together in a way he had never encountered before. They moved as one, thought as one, felt as one. And at the center of that vast network was a single burning point of absolute determination. The captain, the one called Vasquez. Kethras touched that mind, just briefly, just enough to understand what he was dealing with. What he found there made him weep. So much pain, so much loss, so much grief. But beneath all of that, something else. Something that burned brighter than any star. Hope. Not hope that they would survive. Not hope that they would be remembered. But hope that they could make a difference. Hope that their sacrifice would mean something. Hope that even one ship, crewed by one species that refused to surrender, could change the fate of the galaxy. Kethras withdrew from the connection, shaking with emotion. He had lived for 1,000 years. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had witnessed the death of civilizations and the birth of new species. But he had never, in all his long life, encountered anything like humanity. They are coming, he whispered to the empty chamber. The humans are coming, and they are going to burn the Vrithkai to ash. He believed it. Against all logic, against all reason, against everything he knew about the universe and how it worked, he believed it, because he had touched their minds. He had felt their fire, and he knew, with absolute certainty, that a species like that could not be stopped. The transmission arrived at the Galactic Council headquarters without warning. It came on frequencies that had not been used in centuries. Ancient, primitive frequencies that most species had abandoned long ago in favor of faster and more secure methods of communication. The message was simple, direct, and completely unexpected. This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the United Earth ship Prometheus. We are the survivors of Sol. We know what the Vrethkai are. We know what they have done. And we are coming to help. High Arbiter Molketh stared at the communication screen in disbelief. Around him, the council chamber had fallen completely silent. Representatives from 47 species, all that remained of what had once been 1,000, sat frozen in their seats, unable to process what they had just heard. Humans, Molketh finally said. His crystalline body flickered with confusion. The humans were exterminated 18 cycles ago. Our records are very clear. The Vrithkai destroyed their homeworld completely. There were no survivors. Your records show that they lost their world, said Ambassador Vryn of the Korvath, her scales rippling with sudden interest. That is not the same as losing their species. We have all seen this before. Refugee ships escaping during an invasion, colony vessels hiding in the darkness between stars. But the humans had no colony vessels, Molketh protested. They were a young species. They had barely begun to explore their own solar system. Where could survivors have hidden for 18 years? The void, said Admiral Kethras. His voice was quiet, but it carried across the chamber with the weight of absolute certainty. They crossed the Sagittarius void. The chamber erupted in disbelieving murmurs. The void? Impossible. The radiation levels alone would have killed any crew within days. The distance would have taken years to cross, even at maximum speed. No species had ever attempted it. No species had ever been desperate enough to try. But then again, no species had ever been humanity. I have touched their minds, Kethras continued. I have felt what they have been through. 18 years in that hell, surviving on nothing but determination and rage. They should be dead. By every law of nature and probability, they should be dead. He paused, his ancient eyes sweeping across the chamber. But they are not dead. They are very much alive. And they are coming here. One ship, Molketh said dismissively. Even if this transmission is genuine, what can one ship do against the Vrethkai? They have 10,000 vessels. They have consumed the resources of 100 worlds. One ship cannot make any difference. I would not be so certain, Kethras replied. The minds I touched were unlike anything I have encountered before. They are connected to each other in ways I cannot fully understand. They share thoughts, memories, emotions, and beneath all of that, there is something else, something powerful. What? I do not know how to describe it. It is like fire, a fire that cannot be extinguished, a fire that has been burning for 18 years, fed by grief and anger and an absolute refusal to accept defeat. Kethras shook his head slowly. I have never felt anything like it. I do not think anyone has. The chamber fell silent again. The representatives looked at each other, uncertainty written on their various faces. For 3 centuries, they had been running, fighting, losing. The Vrithkai had seemed unstoppable, an inevitable force of nature that would eventually consume everything. And now, from the one place in the galaxy that no one had expected, help was coming. Even if these humans are as powerful as you say, Molketh said carefully, they are still just one ship. The Vrithkai advance fleet will reach us in less than a month. That fleet contains over 500 warships, 500 against 1. The mathematics are clear. Mathematics, Kethras said softly. Yes, the mathematics are very clear. And yet, he trailed off, his clouded eyes distant. Yet what? Vryn asked. When I touched the captain's mind, the one called Vasquez, I saw something. A memory. A moment from the invasion of their world. He closed his eyes, recalling what he had witnessed. The Vrithkai had landed in one of their cities. A large city, millions of inhabitants. The human military was destroyed. There were no weapons left, no soldiers, no hope of rescue. The Vrithkai commander expected the population to surrender, to accept their fate, to die quietly, as so many other species had died before them. He opened his eyes. Instead, the humans attacked. Civilians, elders, children. They attacked with whatever they could find. Rocks, sticks, their bare hands. They knew they could not win. They knew they were going to die. But they fought anyway, because they refused to give the Vrethkai the satisfaction of an easy victory. Kethras looked around the chamber. The Vrethkai killed them all, of course, but it took them 3 days to pacify that single city. 3 days, against unarmed civilians, and when the commander reported back to his superiors, do you know what he said? The representatives shook their heads. He said that he had never, in his entire career, encountered anything like humanity. He said that they were the most stubborn, the most irrational, the most absolutely infuriating species he had ever fought. He recommended that the Vrethkai never leave survivors when facing humans, because survivors would always come back to fight again. Kethras smiled, a thin and humorless expression. That commander's recommendation was ignored. The Vrithkai were arrogant. They believed that no survivors could possibly threaten them, and now, 18 years later, one ship full of survivors is coming to prove them wrong. He rose from his seat, his ancient bones creaking with the effort. I do not know if the humans can win. I do not know if one ship can make any difference against the Vrethkai armada, but I know this. If any species in this galaxy could accomplish the impossible, it would be them, and I, for one, intend to give them every chance. The chamber remained silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, Ambassador Vryn rose to her feet. The Korvath will support the humans, she said. Whatever resources we have left, we will share with them. One by one, other representatives stood. The Thessari, the Mindweavers, a dozen other species who had been pushed to the edge of extinction. Finally, reluctantly, Molkith nodded. Very well. The Council will welcome these humans. We will provide what assistance we can. He paused, his crystalline body flickering with uncertainty. But I hope you are right about them, Admiral. If you are not, this will be the final mistake we ever make. 2 days later, the Prometheus arrived. It dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Council territory, appearing so suddenly that the defense stations almost opened fire before they recognized the human identification codes. The ship that emerged was unlike anything the Council had ever seen. It was dark, not just painted black, but somehow actively absorbing light, as if it were made of solidified shadow. Its hull was covered in strange angles and surfaces that seemed to shift when you looked at them directly. There were no visible weapons ports, no sensor arrays, no communication dishes. It looked less like a warship and more like a predator, a deep-sea creature rising from the darkness of some forgotten ocean. The Council sent a welcoming delegation to meet the human captain. They chose their most experienced diplomats, their most skilled communicators, their most impressive representatives. They wanted to show the humans that the Council was still a force to be reckoned with, even after centuries of defeat. But when Captain Elena Vasquez stepped off the Prometheus and onto the Council station, all of their careful preparations fell apart. She was not what they expected. The Council representatives had studied human biology. They knew that humans were relatively small, relatively weak, relatively short-lived. They expected someone fragile, someone who would be awed by the advanced species of the Council, someone who would need guidance and protection. What they got was a woman who looked like she had been forged in a furnace. Vasquez was not tall, but she carried herself as if she were. Her gray hair was cut short, practical. Her face was lined with years of stress and radiation exposure. Her eyes were dark and hard and absolutely uncompromising. She wore a simple uniform, faded and worn, with no decorations or medals, only a small patch on her shoulder showing a blue and green sphere. Earth. She walked with the easy confidence of someone who had faced death so many times that it no longer held any fear. Behind her came a small group of officers, all of them showing the same worn determination, the same quiet intensity. Molketh stepped forward to deliver his prepared greeting. He had rehearsed it carefully, a formal welcome that expressed the Council's sympathy for humanity's loss and gratitude for their arrival. "Captain Vasquez," he began, "on behalf of the Galactic Council, I welcome you to—" "How long until the Vrethkai reach you?" Vasquez interrupted. Molketh blinked, his greeting forgotten. "The advance fleet will arrive in approximately 24 days. What forces do you have?" "We have managed to gather a defensive fleet of approximately 60 vessels. Most are damaged. Many are outdated. But, how many Vrethkai ships are coming?" 512, according to our intelligence. Vasquez nodded, as if this were exactly what she had expected. "Show me your tactical situation. I want to see everything: fleet positions, supply lines, defensive installations, everything." Molketh hesitated. The Council did not share tactical information with strangers. There were protocols to follow, security checks to perform, trust to establish. But before he could explain this, Admiral Kethras stepped forward. "Captain Vasquez," he said, "I am Admiral Kethras of the Mindweavers. I believe we have met before." In a manner of speaking, Vasquez turned to face him. For a long moment, she simply looked at the ancient alien, her expression unreadable. Then, slowly, she nodded. "You touched my mind. In the void. I felt you. Yes. I apologize for the intrusion. I was trying to understand what was coming toward us." "And what did you understand?" Kethras met her gaze without flinching. "That you are angry. That you have been angry for 18 years. And that you intend to make the Vrethkai pay for what they did to your world." Vasquez smiled. It was not a warm smile. "That is correct. Then I will personally vouch for you to the Council. You will have full access to our tactical situation. You will have our complete cooperation." He turned to the other representatives. "This is the species I told you about. The ones who fought with rocks and sticks against the Vrethkai military. The ones who crossed the uncrossable. The ones who refused to accept defeat." He looked back at Vasquez. "I believe they are our last chance. And I believe we should let them lead." There was a long silence. Then, one by one, the representatives nodded. Over the next several days, Captain Vasquez reviewed everything the Council had to offer. Their fleet, their weapons, their defenses, their intelligence on Vrethkai tactics and capabilities. What she found was not encouraging. The Council's fleet was a shadow of what it had once been. Most of the ships were old, patched together from salvaged parts, crewed by refugees and survivors who had never expected to fight again. Their weapons were outdated. Their shields were weak. Their supplies were running low. Against the Vrethkai advance fleet, they would last perhaps an hour. But Vasquez did not show any disappointment. She studied each piece of information carefully, asked questions, took notes. Her officers spread out through the Council station, meeting with military commanders and engineers and scientists, gathering every scrap of useful knowledge they could find. And slowly, a plan began to form. "You cannot be serious," Molketh said when Vasquez presented her strategy to the Council. "You want us to use our fleet as bait?" "That is correct," Vasquez replied calmly. "The Vrethkai expect you to defend this location. They expect you to form a defensive line and try to hold them off as long as possible. That is what every species has done. That is what they have learned to counter." She brought up a tactical display, showing the positions of the Council fleet and the approaching Vrethkai. "Instead, we will do something they do not expect. Your fleet will engage them, yes, but only to draw their attention, to make them commit their forces to the attack. While they are focused on you, my ship will strike." "One ship against 500, Molketh said skeptically. "Even with your unusual technologies, how can that possibly work?" "It will work because they will not see us coming. The Prometheus has been modified with stealth systems that no Vrethkai sensor can detect. We will approach from their blind side, position ourselves at the heart of their fleet, and then," she paused, "and then we will show them what humanity can do when it is truly angry." The Council representatives exchanged uncertain glances. They did not understand. They could not understand. Vasquez had not told them about the Unity network, about the linked minds, about the power that 12,000 humans could generate when they focused their fury on a single target. She would show them. When the time came, she would show everyone. "You are asking us to risk our last defenders," Vryn said. "If your plan fails, we will have nothing left. If my plan fails, you will have nothing left anyway." Vasquez replied bluntly. The Vreth-Kai will sweep through your defenses. In a matter of hours, they will hunt down every survivor, destroy every refugee ship, burn every hidden colony. There is no scenario in which passive defense works. There is no scenario in which running saves you. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of each representative. The only scenario in which any of you survive is the one where we fight back, where we stop running and start attacking, where we make the Vreth-Kai pay such a high price that they begin to wonder if the conquest is worth it. Her voice hardened. I know you are afraid. I know you have been afraid for 3 centuries. But fear has not saved you. Caution has not protected you. The Vreth-Kai do not respect fear or caution. They respect strength. They respect the willingness to fight. She placed her hands on the council table. My people learned that lesson the hard way. We learned it in the burning cities of our homeworld, watching our children die in our arms. We learned that the only thing the Vreth-Kai understand is pain, and we have been preparing for 18 years to teach them that lesson. She straightened. You can join us, or you can wait here for the end. The choice is yours. The chamber was silent. The representatives looked at each other, centuries of defeat and despair weighing on their shoulders. They had run so long. They had lost so much. The idea of fighting back, of actually attacking the Vreth-Kai, seemed almost impossible to imagine. But then Admiral Kethra spoke. I will fight, he said quietly. My flagship is old and my crew is tired, but we will fight alongside the humans. Ambassador Vryn stood. The Korvath will fight as well. We would rather die as warriors than live as prey. One by one, the other representatives rose. Some were hesitant. Some were afraid. But they all stood, committing their species to the battle that would decide the fate of the galaxy. Finally, Molketh sighed and rose to his feet. Very well, he said. The council will fight. May the stars have mercy on us all. Vasquez nodded, a thin smile crossing her face. The stars have nothing to do with it, she said. This is about us, about what we are willing to sacrifice, about whether we have the courage to stand up to those who would destroy us. She turned and walked toward the door. Prepare your fleet. In 20 days we make our stand. In 20 days we remind the Vreth-Kai what happens when you push a species too far. She paused at the door and looked back. In 20 days, humanity shows the galaxy what we are really made of. Then she was gone, leaving the council to prepare for the battle that would change everything. In the depths of the Prometheus, 12,000 sleepers dreamed of fire and vengeance. Their minds were connected through the Unity network, sharing thoughts and memories and emotions across the vast web of neural links. They dreamed of Earth, of blue skies and green forests and oceans that sparkled in the sunlight. They dreamed of families they had lost, homes that had burned, lives that had been stolen. And they dreamed of what they would do when they finally faced the Vreth-Kai again. Captain Vasquez walked through the corridors of her ship, feeling the pulse of those 12,000 minds like a second heartbeat in her chest. They were ready. They had been ready for 18 years. All that remained was to point them at the enemy and release the fury that had been building since the day their world died. She entered the central command chamber, where the Unity network's core processor hummed with contained power. It was a massive device, filled with quantum circuits and neural interfaces and technologies that human scientists had invented during the long crossing. It was the heart of the Prometheus, the key to everything they had planned. Lieutenant Chen was waiting for her. He was the ship's chief engineer, a quiet man who had been responsible for most of the modifications that had transformed the Prometheus from an ordinary warship into something unprecedented. Everything is ready, Captain, he reported. The network is stable. The weapons are charged. The sleepers are prepared for awakening. And the new weapon? Chen hesitated. It is ready. But Captain, are you sure about this? The power requirements are enormous. If anything goes wrong, the ship could be destroyed. The ship does not matter, Vasquez said quietly. Only the mission matters. Only victory matters. She looked at the core processor, its lights pulsing in sync with the 12,000 dreams flowing through it. We did not survive the void just to die running. We did not spend 18 years preparing just to hide in the shadows. We came here to fight. We came here to win. And we came here to make the Vreth-Kai understand exactly what they created when they burned our world. Her voice hardened. They created an enemy who has nothing left to lose. An enemy who is not afraid to die. An enemy who will drag them into the darkness with us if that is what it takes. She turned to face Chen. When the battle begins, you will wake the sleepers. All 12,000, at once. You will connect them to the network, and when I give the order, you will focus all of their rage, all of their grief, all of their fury on the enemy. And then, Vasquez smiled. It was not a kind smile. And then we will remind the Vrithkai why they should have finished the job. She walked to the viewing port and looked out at the stars. For 18 years, we have been ghosts, shadows hiding in the void, but not anymore. Now we become something else. Now we become the reckoning they have been running from. Her hand touched the cold glass. Earth is dead. Our people are scattered. Our home is gone. But humanity is not finished. We are still here. We are still fighting. And we will never, ever stop. She turned away from the stars. Tell the crew to prepare. In 20 days, we go to war. And in the darkness of space, the Prometheus waited, a dark blade hidden in the shadows, ready to strike at the heart of an empire that did not yet know it was about to fall. The first engagement happened in the Thesson debris field. A Vrithkai hunter-killer squadron had cornered a convoy of refugees, 12 transport ships carrying the last survivors of the Thesson species. 40,000 civilians, elders, children, families who had fled their homeworld when the Vrithkai came and had been running ever since. Now they had nowhere left to run. Squadron Commander Vrithnar watched the convoy from his bridge with cold satisfaction. The Thessari were a weak species. They had offered no real resistance when the Vrithkai invaded their system. They had simply run, scattering like frightened animals, hiding in the shadows of the galaxy. But there were no shadows deep enough to hide from the Vrithkai. There never were. All ships, Vrithnar ordered. Begin the hunt. Make it slow. I want them to know what happens to those who flee from us. His 12 frigates spread out, forming a net around the convoy. The transport ships had no weapons, no shields worth mentioning, no chance of escape. This would not be a battle. It would be an execution. The lead frigate opened fire. A beam of superheated plasma lanced out toward the nearest transport ship, ready to burn through its thin hull, and something appeared between the frigate and its target. There was no hyperspace signature, no energy buildup, no warning of any kind. One moment, empty space. The next moment, a ship. It was dark. Darker than the space around it, as if it were a hole in the fabric of reality. Its angles were strange. Its surface seemed to shift and move, and it was already firing. Vrithnar had a single second to process what he was seeing. A single second to realize that something was wrong. A single second to wonder where this impossible ship had come from. Then his frigate exploded. The weapon that destroyed it was unlike anything the Vrithkai had ever encountered. It was not a plasma beam or a missile or a kinetic projectile. It was something else. A pulse of distorted space that crumpled the frigate's hull like paper, crushing it inward until there was nothing left but a small sphere of compressed metal. The second frigate died before its crew could react. Then the third. Then the fourth. The dark ship moved through the squadron like a predator through a herd of prey. It twisted and spun in ways that seemed to violate physics, accelerating and decelerating without any visible thrust, changing direction instantaneously, always staying one step ahead of the Vrithkai weapons. The frigates tried to fight back. Of course they did. They were Vrithkai warriors, bred for combat, trained to never retreat. They poured fire at the dark ship, plasma beams and missiles and everything they had. Nothing worked. The dark ship's hull seemed to absorb the attacks. Plasma beams splashed harmlessly against its surface. Missiles detonated before they could reach it, caught in invisible gravity wells and crushed to nothing. The Vrithkai weapons might as well have been throwing rocks. In 4 minutes, it was over. 12 frigates. Destroyed. Not damaged, not disabled. Destroyed. Completely and utterly. Reduced to clouds of debris and floating bodies. The dark ship hung motionless in the center of the wreckage, its strange hull glittering with captured starlight. Then, on every frequency, a message played. This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the United Earthship Prometheus. We are the survivors of Sol. We remember what you took from us. Now learn what it costs. The message repeated 3 times. Then the dark ship vanished, disappearing as suddenly as it had appeared, leaving behind nothing but destruction and a single, terrifying word: Prometheus. The convoy of refugees sat in stunned silence. 40,000 Thessari, who had been seconds away from death, were suddenly and inexplicably alive. The children were crying. The elders were praying. And somewhere, in the depths of the lead transport ship, a young Thessari named Volketh was recording everything he had just witnessed. The message he sent to the council would change everything. Admiral Sirvex received the report 6 hours later. He read it 3 times, convinced that there must be some mistake. A single ship had destroyed an entire squadron. In 4 minutes? Without taking any damage? Impossible. It had to be a sensor malfunction, or a misunderstanding, or some kind of trick. The Vrethkai had never lost an engagement like this. In 3 centuries of conquest, no species had ever been able to match them ship for ship, but the debris field was real. The wreckage was real. 12 frigates and their crews were really, truly dead. Find this ship. Sirvex ordered his intelligence officers. I want to know where it came from, what species built it, and how we can destroy it. The intelligence officers tried. They really did. They searched the databases for any record of a species called humanity, or a world called Sol. They analyzed the weapon signatures, trying to match them to known technologies. They studied the debris, looking for clues about how the attack had been carried out. They found nothing useful. The humans were listed in the old records as a recently destroyed species. Their world had been burned 18 years ago. There had been no survivors. The invasion commander had been absolutely certain of that. Except, clearly, he had been wrong. Over the following days, more reports came in. The dark ship, the Prometheus, was everywhere. It struck without warning, appeared from nowhere, and vanished before anyone could respond. A supply convoy at Korvath Station. Destroyed. A shipyard at the edge of Vrithkai territory. Destroyed. A communications relay that had been monitoring council movements. Destroyed. An assassination of 3 sector commanders. Killed in their own flagships. Their crews found dead at their stations with no visible wounds. Every attack was the same. Fast, brutal, and absolutely devastating. The Prometheus never stayed to fight a prolonged battle. It appeared, killed, and vanished, leaving behind only wreckage and that same message. Remember, Sol. Remember what you took from us. Now learn what it costs. The conquered species began to stir. Whispers spread through the labor camps and slave pits where billions of captives worked for the Vrithkai war machine. The humans were back. The humans were fighting. And for the first time in 3 centuries, the Vrithkai were losing. It was not just hope. It was something more dangerous than hope. It was the beginning of belief. In a mining colony on the edge of Vrithkai space, a group of Korvath slaves overpowered their guards and seized control of a weapons depot. When Vrithkai reinforcements arrived, they found the colony empty, the weapons gone, and a message painted on the wall in Korvath blood. For Sol. For Earth. For humanity. In a factory complex that produced warship components, Thessari workers sabotaged an entire production run. Thousands of power cores were shipped to the Vrithkai fleet, each one carrying a hidden defect that would cause it to fail at the worst possible moment. In a breeding facility where the Vrithkai grew soldiers from captured genetic material, a lone Selenari scientist introduced a mutation that would cause the next generation of warriors to age at 10 times the normal rate. They would grow quickly, yes, but they would also die quickly. Everywhere, resistance was rising. Small acts of sabotage, hidden messages of hope. The quiet refusal to surrender that had been crushed for so long was suddenly burning again, fed by the knowledge that somewhere out there, someone was fighting back. The Vrithkai tried to crush it. They always tried to crush it. They increased patrols, executed troublemakers, made examples of anyone who showed the slightest sign of defiance. But it was not enough. The fire was spreading, and every time they stamped it out in one place, it appeared in 2 more. And always, at the heart of it all, was the Prometheus. Captain Vasquez stood on the bridge of her ship, reviewing the reports from across Vrithkai territory. The uprisings, the sabotage, the growing resistance movement that was spreading like wildfire through the conquered species. She had not planned this. She had not expected it. But she understood it. For 3 centuries, the galaxy had lived in fear. The Vrithkai had seemed unstoppable, inevitable, an irresistible force that could not be challenged. Species had surrendered without fighting because they believed fighting was useless. They had accepted their fate because they saw no alternative. But now there was an alternative. One ship. One species that refused to surrender. One example of what was possible when you stopped running and started fighting. That was enough. That was all it took. A single spark, and the whole galaxy was ready to burn. "Captain," Lieutenant Chen reported, "we are receiving intelligence from our network. The Vrethkai are pulling their main fleet back from the front lines. They are consolidating their forces." Vasquez nodded. She had expected this too. The Vrethkai were not stupid. They knew that something had changed. They knew that they needed to respond with overwhelming force. How many ships? At least 4,000. Possibly more. They are gathering at a staging area near the Korvath system. 4,000 warships. Against her one. Any sane person would have seen those numbers and despaired. Any reasonable commander would have calculated the odds and realized that victory was impossible. But Captain Elena Vasquez was not feeling particularly sane or reasonable. "Good," she said. "Let them gather. Let them bring everything they have." She turned to face her crew. "We have spent 18 years preparing for this moment. We have spent 18 years building something that the galaxy has never seen before. We have spent 18 years dreaming of revenge." Her voice hardened. "Now it is time to stop dreaming and start doing. The Vrethkai want to crush us with numbers? Fine. Let them try. Let them throw their entire fleet at us. Let them commit everything they have to our destruction." She smiled, and there was nothing pleasant about it, because when they do, they will learn what we have become. They will learn that we are not just one ship with advanced weapons. We are 12,000 human minds, linked together, focused on a single purpose. We are the anger of 8 billion dead. We are the vengeance of a murdered world. She raised her hand. "Wake the sleepers, all of them. Tell them the time has come." Deep in the Prometheus, 12,000 cryogenic pods began to hum with activity. Neural interfaces activated, connecting sleeping minds to the vast web of the Unity network. Dreams of fire and vengeance gave way to cold, determined wakefulness. They were not soldiers, most of them. Before the fall of Earth, they had been farmers and teachers and artists and engineers. They had been parents and children and friends and lovers. They had been ordinary people, living ordinary lives, dreaming ordinary dreams. But the Vrethkai had taken all of that away. They had burned the farms and destroyed the schools and silenced the artists. They had killed the parents and orphaned the children, and murdered the friends and separated the lovers. And in doing so, they had created something new, something dangerous, something that would never, ever forgive. Dr. Michael Wang, the creator of the Unity Network, monitored the awakening from his station in the core chamber. He watched as 12,000 minds came online, their thoughts merging into a vast tapestry of shared consciousness. The anger was the first thing he felt. It was enormous, overwhelming, a wave of fury that threatened to drown his own thoughts. 12,000 people, all of them feeling the same thing, all of them remembering the same losses, all of them wanting the same revenge. But beneath the anger, there was something else. Love. The love of families who had died. The love of a world that had burned. The love of a species that refused to let its story end in defeat. That love was the fuel. The anger was just the fire that burned it. Wang transmitted his report to the bridge. "Captain, the sleepers are awake. The network is at full capacity. We are ready." On the bridge, Vasquez acknowledged the report with a single nod. She turned to the main viewing screen, where the stars of the Orion Arm spread out before her, like a battlefield waiting to be claimed. "Set course for the Korvath system," she ordered. Maximum speed. The Prometheus surged forward, its engines burning with impossible energy. Behind it trailed the ghost of a dead world, the memory of 8 billion souls, and the absolute determination to make their deaths mean something. In the council chamber, Admiral Kethras suddenly gasped and clutched his head. The other representatives turned to look at him, alarmed by his obvious distress. The old Mindweaver was trembling, his clouded eyes wide with shock. "What is it?" Ambassador Vryn asked. "What is wrong?" Kethras did not answer immediately. He was too overwhelmed by what he was feeling. The human minds, all 12,000 of them, had just woken up and connected to their network. And the psychic echo of that connection was washing across the galaxy like a tidal wave. It was not just anger anymore. It was not just determination. It was something else. Something vast and terrible and beautiful. It was a weapon. The humans had taken their grief and their fury and forged it into a blade. A blade made of pure psychic energy. A blade that could cut through anything. "They are ready," Kethras whispered. "The humans are ready. Ready for what? Molketh asked. Kethras looked up at the High Arbiter, his ancient face filled with an emotion that the Council had not seen in centuries. Hope. To show the Vrithkai what it truly means to face an enemy that has nothing left to lose, he said. To teach them the price of genocide. To remind them that there are some species that should never be pushed too far. He rose unsteadily to his feet. The battle for the galaxy is about to begin. And I truly believe, that humanity is going to win. The Council sat in stunned silence. For a moment, no one moved. No one spoke. Then Ambassador Vryn rose to her feet. Then we should be there to witness it, she said. Whatever happens next, the galaxy needs to see it. They need to know that the age of Vrithkai dominance is over. One by one, the other representatives agreed. Whatever their doubts, whatever their fears, they were not going to miss this moment. The Council fleet, such as it was, prepared to move. 60 ships, old and damaged and barely functional. But they would be there. They would watch. And if the humans were right, if they really could do what they promised, then the Council would be there to pick up the pieces of a shattered empire. Across the galaxy, in labor camps and slave pits and hidden refugee ships, billions of captive souls looked up at the stars and waited. They had heard the whispers. They had seen the messages. They knew that something was coming. Something that would change everything. Something that would finally, after 3 centuries of darkness, bring the dawn. The Prometheus flew on, a dark blade cutting through the stars, carrying the hopes of a galaxy and the rage of a murdered world. And at its heart, 12,000 human minds burned with a single, unified thought. The Vrithkai were going to pay, for Earth, for Sol, for every life they had taken. The reckoning was coming, and nothing in the universe was going to stop it. Admiral Sirvex had assembled the greatest fleet in Vrithkai history. 4,000 warships hung in formation around the Korvath staging area, their dark hulls blotting out the stars. Dreadnoughts the size of small moons, carriers packed with thousands of fighters, destroyers and frigates and assault ships, bristling with weapons that had burned 100 worlds, and at the center of the formation, 12 planet killers. The most powerful weapons the Vrithkai possessed, each one capable of cracking a world like an egg, burning away its atmosphere, turning its surface to glass. These were the ships that had ended civilizations. These were the weapons that had made the Vrithkai masters of the galaxy. Sirvex stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Devourer's Maw, and surveyed his armada with cold satisfaction. Whatever this human ship was, whatever technology it possessed, it could not stand against this kind of power. Nothing could. Admiral, his sensor officer reported, we are detecting the human vessel. It has just dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. Just one ship? Sirvex asked. Yes, Admiral, just one ship. It appears to be holding position, not approaching. Sirvex smiled. A thin, cruel smile. They have come to surrender, he said. They have seen our fleet, and realized that their little campaign is over. They have come to beg for mercy. He turned to his communications officer. Open a channel. I want to speak to these humans before I destroy them. The connection took only moments to establish. The main viewing screen flickered, and then Captain Elena Vasquez appeared. She was standing on her bridge, surrounded by her small crew. Her gray hair was pulled back. Her face was calm. Her dark eyes looked directly at Sirvex without any trace of fear. I am Admiral Sirvex of the Vrithkai Armada, Sirvex said. You are the human who has been causing trouble in my territory. I am Captain Elena Vasquez of the United Earthship Prometheus, she replied. And you are one of the species that burned my world. Earth was a minor conquest, one of many. I am surprised anyone even remembers it. We remember. Vasquez's voice was quiet, but it carried a weight that made Sirvex hesitate. We remember everything. Every city that burned, every child that died, every life you stole from us. She paused. We have been remembering for 18 years. We have been preparing for this moment. And now we are here to collect what you owe us. Sirvex laughed. It was a harsh, grating sound. You are here to die, he said. You have one ship. I have 4,000. Whatever tricks you used against my patrols will not work against this fleet. You cannot run. You cannot hide. You cannot fight. All you can do is accept your destruction. Vasquez smiled. It was a strange smile. Almost sad. You still do not understand, she said. You think this is about ships, about weapons, about military power? She shook her head. It is not. It is about something else. Something you have never encountered before. Something you created when you burned our world and left survivors. And what is that? Human determination, Vasquez said. The refusal to accept defeat. The willingness to do whatever it takes to win, no matter the cost. She leaned forward. You should have killed us all, Admiral. You should have hunted down every survivor, destroyed every escape pod, made absolutely certain that nothing was left. But you did not. You were arrogant. You assumed that a few refugees could never threaten you. Her smile grew colder. That was a mistake. And now you are going to pay for it. Sirvex felt a flicker of unease. But he pushed it aside. This human was clearly delusional. One ship against 4,000? It was suicide. Enough talking, he said. All ships, open fire. Destroy them. 4,000 Vrithafkai warships oriented their weapons toward the Prometheus. A storm of energy built up in their firing chambers, enough destructive power to crack planets and burn stars. Then they fired. The space between the fleets filled with plasma beams and missiles and kinetic projectiles. A wall of death rushed toward the lone human ship, ready to obliterate it from existence. The Prometheus did not move. It did not raise shields. It did not try to run. Instead, it began to glow. Captain Vasquez closed her eyes and reached out through the Unity network. 12,000 human minds were connected to her, their thoughts flowing through her like a river of fire. She felt their anger, their grief, their love, their absolute determination. All hands, she said, her voice echoing through every linked consciousness. Focus. Remember what they took from us. Remember why we are here. Remember what we have become. In the depths of the ship, Dr. Wong watched his monitors as the network's power levels began to climb. Higher and higher, past anything they had ever achieved in testing, past anything they had thought possible. The human minds were not just linked anymore. They were merging, becoming something greater than the sum of their parts. A single vast consciousness, fueled by 18 years of rage and sorrow. The glow around the Prometheus intensified. It was not light from the ship's engines or weapons. It was something else, something that came from within, something that pulsed with the rhythm of 12,000 human hearts. The Vrethkai weapons reached the Prometheus. Plasma beams that could melt mountains, missiles that could level cities, kinetic projectiles traveling at a fraction of the speed of light. They all stopped, not deflected, not destroyed. Stopped, held in place by invisible forces, hanging in space like frozen raindrops. And then, slowly, they began to reverse direction. Sirvex watched in disbelief as his own weapons turned against his fleet. Missiles curved back toward the ships that had launched them. Plasma beams bent impossibly, arcing around to strike Vrethkai hulls. Kinetic projectiles slowed, stopped, and then accelerated back the way they had come. What is happening? He demanded. How are they doing this? No one could answer him. No one understood. This was not technology. This was something else. Something that defied explanation. On the bridge of the Prometheus, Captain Vasquez opened her eyes. They were no longer dark. They were glowing with the same light that surrounded her ship, the combined consciousness of 12,000 human souls. Now, she said, let them see what we have become. The Prometheus moved. It did not accelerate gradually. It simply was in one place, and then it was in another, appearing at the heart of the Vrithkai formation as if it had always been there. Its hull was blazing now, surrounded by a corona of psychic fire that burned in colors no eye had ever seen. And then it released everything. 18 years of grief. 18 years of rage. 18 years of patient, focused, implacable determination. All of it, concentrated into a single pulse of pure psychic force that radiated outward from the Prometheus like a shockwave. The Vrethkai fleet died, not gradually, not ship by ship. They died all at once, instantly, as if a god had reached down and simply switched them off. Crews collapsed at their stations, their minds burned out by the wave of human fury that washed over them. Ships went dark, their systems failing as the psychic pulse disrupted every electrical circuit. And then, one by one, the ships began to crumple, crushed by gravity wells that appeared from nowhere, torn apart by forces that seemed to have no source. consumed by the rage of a species that had lost everything and had nothing left to fear. Sirvex watched his armada die. He watched the planet killers, the most powerful weapons his species had ever built, fold in on themselves like paper toys. He watched dreadnoughts the size of small moons simply cease to exist, erased from reality by a power he could not understand. And he watched the Prometheus, hanging in the center of the destruction like the eye of a hurricane, its hull still blazing with that terrible, beautiful light. Then the light reached him. It passed through the hull of his flagship as if the metal were not there. It passed through his crew, dropping them to the deck in lifeless heaps, and it passed through Sirvex himself. But it did not kill him, not immediately. Instead, it showed him something. It opened his mind and poured in 18 years of human memory. The invasion of Earth, the burning cities, the dying children, the desperate flight into the void, the long years of preparation, the cold, patient accumulation of power. It showed him what humanity had been before the Vrethkai came. A species of artists and dreamers and scientists and lovers. A species that had looked up at the stars with wonder, eager to meet the other civilizations of the galaxy. And it showed him what humanity had become after. A species of warriors and ghosts and avenging angels. A species that had taken its grief and forged it into a weapon that could burn the galaxy. Do you understand now? Vasquez's voice echoed in his mind. Do you see what you created? Sirvex tried to respond, but he could not find the words. He was drowning in human emotion. Human memory. Human pain. We were peaceful once, Vasquez continued. We were hopeful. We wanted to be your friends. We wanted to learn from you, to share with you, to build something beautiful together. The memories shifted. Fire and screams and the sound of children crying for parents who could not save them. But you did not want peace. You did not want friendship. You wanted to feed. You wanted to consume. You wanted us to die quietly, like all the others. The psychic pressure increased. Sirvex felt his consciousness beginning to fragment, overwhelmed by the weight of 12,000 human minds. We did not die quietly, Vasquez said. We will never die quietly. And we will never forgive. We will never forget. We will never stop. She paused. Remember this moment, Admiral. Remember the price of genocide, and carry that knowledge with you into whatever comes after. The pressure peaked. Sirvex felt his mind begin to tear apart. His last coherent thought was a mixture of fear and disbelief. One ship, one species, and they had destroyed everything. Then there was nothing. The battle lasted 17 minutes. When it was over, the greatest fleet in Vrethkai history was gone. 4,000 warships reduced to drifting wreckage. Millions of Vrethkai warriors dead. The planet killers, the symbols of Vrethkai supremacy, were nothing but expanding clouds of debris. And at the center of the destruction, the Prometheus hung motionless. Its glow was fading now, the psychic fire dying down as 12,000 exhausted minds released their connection. On the bridge, Captain Elena Vasquez collapsed into her command chair. She was drained. Completely, utterly drained. The effort of channeling all that power, all that emotion, had taken everything she had. But she was smiling. Lieutenant Chen approached her carefully. Captain, are you all right? I am fine, Vasquez said weakly. I am just tired. She looked at the viewing screen, where the remnants of the Vrethkai fleet drifted in silent testimony to what had happened. Is it over? The fleet is destroyed, Captain. There are no survivors. Vasquez nodded slowly. And the council? Did they see? They saw everything. They are transmitting the recordings across the galaxy. Good. Vasquez closed her eyes. Let them see. Let everyone see. Let them know that the age of Vrethkai dominance is over. She took a deep breath. And let them know that humanity is here. That we survived. That we will protect anyone who needs protecting. And the Vrethkai homeworld? Their remaining forces. Vasquez was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was quiet. We will offer them a choice. Surrender and face justice for their crimes, or continue fighting and face destruction. She opened her eyes. We are not them. We will not become them. We came here for vengeance, yes. But we did not come here to commit genocide. We came here to end a war, not to start an eternal one. She straightened in her chair. Contact the remaining Vrethkai forces. Tell them what happened here. Tell them that they can still choose peace. But make sure they understand if they choose war, we will give them war. And they have seen what that means. The message went out across the galaxy. The recordings of the battle followed, and everywhere, on every world, in every labor camp and refugee ship and hidden colony, people watched in stunned silence as a single human ship destroyed the fleet that had terrorized the galaxy for 3 centuries. Then, the celebrations began. On Thessan refugee ships, families who had lived in fear for generations wept with joy. In Korvath labor camps, prisoners overwhelmed their guards and raised makeshift flags of liberation. On the council station, representatives from 47 species embraced each other and laughed and cried and gave thanks to whatever powers they believed in. And everywhere, one word was spoken again and again, like a prayer, like a promise, like a new name for hope itself. Humanity. The humans had come. The humans had fought. And the humans had won. 5 years later, the Galactic Council welcomed its newest member species. The ceremony was held in the Great Chamber, which had been rebuilt and expanded to accommodate the growing number of representatives. Species that had been on the edge of extinction were now thriving again. Worlds that had been conquered were free. The Vrethkai Empire had collapsed, its remaining population scattered and broken, many of them facing justice for the crimes of their ancestors. Captain Elena Vasquez, now Ambassador Vasquez, stood before the assembled representatives. Behind her, through the great windows of the chamber, the Prometheus hung in space. It was a museum ship now, a monument to what desperation and determination could achieve. And playing in the observation deck, laughing at the stars, were the first generation of children born after the war. "We did not come here to conquer," Vasquez said, her voice carrying across the silent chamber. "We did not come here to rule. We came here because home is wherever people need protecting, and we came here because we refuse to let what happened to us happen to anyone else." She looked around at the representatives, Selenari, and Korvath, and Thessari, and Mindweavers, species she had never heard of before the war, but who she now counted as friends. The galaxy has seen enough destruction, enough conquest, enough empires built on the bones of the innocent. It is time for something new, time for a community of equals, where every species has a voice and every world is safe. She smiled. It was a genuine smile now, no longer the cold, hard expression she had worn during the war. Humanity is proud to join this community. We will contribute what we can. We will protect those who need protection. We will stand with you against any threat. Her smile faded slightly, replaced by something more serious. But let me be clear about one thing. We have learned something about ourselves during the past 2 decades. Something important. She looked directly at the recording devices that were broadcasting her words across the galaxy. We prefer peace. We really do. We want to explore, to discover, to create, to build friendships across the stars. We want our children to grow up in a galaxy where war is a distant memory. Her voice hardened. But if anyone threatens that peace, if anyone tries to do to others what the Vrethkai did to us, they will find us waiting. They will find 12,000 human minds, linked together, ready to fight. They will find a species that has already lost everything once, and is not afraid to lose everything again. She raised her hand, and the chamber fell absolutely silent. We are humanity. We are kind. We are creative. We make wonderful friends and terrible enemies. We have long memories and absolutely no patience for tyrants. Her smile returned, but there was steel behind it. And we will be here. We will always be here. Watching, waiting, ready. The chamber erupted in applause. Representatives rose to their feet, cheering for the species that had saved them all. The sound echoed through the station and out into the void, a celebration of survival and hope and the future that lay ahead. Ambassador Vasquez stood at the center of it all, accepting the gratitude with grace and humility. But in her heart, she was somewhere else. She was standing on the bridge of the Prometheus, looking out at the stars. She was holding her father's hand as he died from radiation poisoning. She was watching Earth burn from the window of a crippled ship. She was remembering. 8 billion people had died so that she could stand here today. 8 billion lives, snuffed out by Vrethkai cruelty. She would never forget them. She would never let the galaxy forget them. But she could honor them, by building a better future, by protecting the innocent, by making sure that no species ever had to go through what humanity had gone through. That was the real victory. Not the destruction of the Vrethkai fleet, Not the liberation of the conquered worlds, but this, a chamber full of representatives from across the galaxy, working together to build something new, something worth protecting. Ambassador Vasquez looked up at the stars and smiled. "We made it, Dad," she whispered. "We kept our promise. We survived. We made a difference. Somewhere," she hoped, he was listening, and in the observation deck,